It all started on a regular Saturday morning, the kind where you're just trying to enjoy your coffee, knock out some weekend chores, and maybe finally get that toolbox organized. I had just parked my pickup truck. Yes, my own truck, in my own garage. Nothing unusual, right? But apparently, that was too much for our neighborhood's self-proclaimed enforcer. Karen. She's the kind of HOA board member who thinks she's got a badge, a siren, and the final say on everything from mailbox colors to how loud your lawnmower hums. I was inside, just a few steps away from the garage, when I heard voices outside. Curious, I peeked through the blinds and what do I see? Karen, pacing around my driveway, phone in hand, clearly on a 911 call. At first, I thought maybe someone got hurt or there was a break-in. But no, she was calling the cops on me, for parking a pickup truck in my own garage. She claimed it was a code violation and said I was bringing down the neighborhood's aesthetic. I couldn't make this up if I tried. The whole thing spiraled faster than I expected. Before long, a police cruiser pulled up, lights off but definitely present. I stepped outside, expecting maybe a serious talk or some sort of ridiculous ticket. But what happened next left me speechless and nearly made me laugh out loud. Karen marched over to the officer like she was filing a federal complaint, waving her HOA handbook like it was the Constitution. She pointed to my truck and ranted about visual pollution and how the HOA rules forbid work vehicles. The cop turned to me, raised an eyebrow, then looked back at Karen. And what he said next changed everything. But let's just say Karen didn't get the reaction she was expecting. The whole situation quickly turned into something none of us saw coming, and trust me, it didn't end there. What the officer did next had the entire block buzzing for days. So there we were, me, Karen, and the cop standing in the middle of my driveway with the engine of my pickup still slightly ticking. As it cooled down, Karen was red in the face, holding her clipboard like it was a weapon, rattling off some obscure HOA bylaw about commercial vehicles. The cop kept a straight face, but you could tell he was holding back a chuckle. I stayed quiet, just watching the whole thing unfold like it was a bad episode of some neighborhood drama show. Now, to give you a bit of context, Karen has been a thorn in everyone's side for months. Ever since she got herself elected to the HOA, board no posed, mind you, she's treated the entire subdivision like her personal kingdom. She's already written up my next-door neighbor for hanging wind chimes that were too loud and sent warnings to a sweet, elderly couple 2 streets over for having a bird feeder in their yard. But this, calling 911 over a pickup truck in a closed garage. This was a whole new level of crazy. What made it even more ridiculous was that my truck isn't some rusted-out eyesore or giant work rig with logos all over it. It's a clean, black pickup, well-maintained, no commercial markings, and fully registered for personal use. And yes, it fits perfectly inside my garage, out of sight. But apparently, that didn't sit well with Karen's idea of a picture-perfect neighborhood. And this wasn't even the first time she tried something like this. A few weeks ago, she left a note on my windshield claiming I was in violation of visible storage, whatever that means. But this time, she'd gone way too far. I mean, calling the police over a truck. You could feel the tension in the air, and the neighbors were starting to peek out from behind their curtains. Something told me this wasn't going to end quietly. And I was right. The officer turned toward Karen and calmly asked, "Ma'am, is this an emergency?" Her mouth opened, then closed, like she was trying to find a better excuse mid-sentence. She insisted that it was serious, said I was disturbing the uniformity of the neighborhood, and that the HOA rules were being willfully ignored. The officer gave her a look that said he'd heard this kind of nonsense before. Still, he walked over and asked if I minded stepping aside to explain my side. I nodded and told him everything, how the truck was mine, used for personal errands, and parked inside my own garage like any other vehicle. Meanwhile, More neighbors were starting to gather, pretending to water plants or walk their dogs, clearly watching the scene unfold. And that's when Mr. Patel from across the street spoke up. "You know, officer, she reported me last month because my garbage bins weren't pulled in by 10 a.m. He said loud enough for Karen to hear. Another neighbor chimed in. "She took photos of my front porch because my pumpkins were still out after Thanksgiving." Karen's face stiffened. Her plan wasn't going how she'd imagined. But instead of backing off, she doubled down. She insisted I was running a business from home because, apparently, a pickup equals a contractor. She even claimed she had witnessed deliveries. I almost laughed. Those deliveries were furniture I ordered online. But now it was clear. This wasn't just about a truck. Karen was looking for reasons to control, to assert authority over the people living around her. That's when the officer looked around and saw how the neighborhood was reacting. People weren't on her side, and the tension, it was rising. But the real twist? It wasn't over yet. Because just as things seemed to quiet down, Karen pulled out a manila folder from her bag, thick with printed pages. "This isn't just about him," she said, eyes scanning the growing crowd. "This neighborhood is going downhill, and I have proof." The air got heavier. Whatever was in that folder was about to stir up a whole new wave of trouble. Karen stood there, gripping that folder like it held the fate of the entire neighborhood. The officer, now more curious than concerned, asked her what was in it. Without a word, she flipped it open and started pulling out papers, printouts of security camera screenshots, emails she'd written to the HOA board, and copies of violations she claimed she'd documented over the past few months. It wasn't just about me anymore. She had something on nearly every house on the block. The mood shifted fast. The neighbors who had been quietly watching from a distance now stepped closer, murmuring among themselves. She pointed at the Thompsons' house, accusing them of having unauthorized solar panels. She waved a photo of a teen's car parked slightly crooked, claiming it was a safety hazard. She even circled back to me and claimed she'd seen tools in my garage, suggesting I was operating a repair shop illegally. It was obvious now she had spent months digging through everyone's lives, just waiting for the moment to unleash it all. I felt a chill run down my spine, not because I was scared, but because I realized just how far Karen was willing to go. This wasn't about rules or regulations. This was personal. She wanted control, and she was using the HOA handbook like a weapon. The officer tried to stay neutral, but even he seemed overwhelmed by the sudden flood of accusations. And just when I thought the drama had peaked, Karen reached into the folder one more time. "I've submitted formal complaints for every one of these," she said sharply. "And if the HOA won't act, I will." Her voice echoed down the street. Everyone was quiet now. The tension was thick, and every pair of eyes was locked on that folder like it might explode. I could see the officer shifting his stance, clearly preparing for whatever was about to come next. No one knew what she was going to do. But one thing was certain. The situation had just reached its boiling point. Just as Karen stood there, waving her papers like she'd just delivered a closing argument in court, something unexpected happened. From the end of the street, another car slowly pulled up. Dark SUV with tinted windows and a small HOA emblem on the door. Everyone turned to look. It was Mr. Lanning, the actual president of the HOA, and someone who rarely got involved in neighborhood drama unless things really got out of hand. He stepped out calmly, adjusted his glasses, and walked straight toward the crowd, his eyes scanning the scene like he already knew what kind of fire he was walking into. Karen immediately perked up, thinking he was about to back her up. "Finally," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Someone who will actually enforce the rules around here." But Mr. Lanning didn't even acknowledge her at first. He went straight to the officer, quietly asked what had happened, then turned to me and said, "You mind if I take a quick look at your garage?" I nodded, motioning for him to go ahead. He stepped inside, glanced around for a moment, then walked back out and said, "Looks like a clean garage to me." Karen's face dropped. "What?" "He has tools. There's equipment. Is hiding something." She started, but Mr. Lanning raised a hand. "Karen, I've received over 20 emails from you in the last month. Photos, complaints, even anonymous letters we all knew were from you. I came out here today because the board voted to review your conduct." The crowd went silent. That's when Karen did something none of us expected. She snapped. She began yelling not just at me, but at the neighbors, the officer, even Mr. Lanning himself, accusing everyone of being lazy, of not caring about property values, of letting standards drop. And then she pointed to the folder and shouted, "You'll all regret this. I have more, so much more. I haven't even started." That's when we realized this wasn't just about me parking a pickup truck. Karen had a list, a plan, and clearly a deeper motive no one had seen coming. And whatever it was about to unfold in ways none of us could have predicted. The tension in the air was sharp, like everyone was holding their breath. Karen's outburst had gone from dramatic to full-blown meltdown. Neighbors stood frozen, unsure whether to step back or step in. Mr. Lanning stayed calm, though you could tell even he was rattled by how far she had taken things. The officer motioned her to lower her voice, but she wouldn't stop. She started pulling out more papers, ranting about unauthorized garden gnomes, illegally hung curtains, and even someone's choice of mailbox paint. Then came the turning point. Mr. Lanning raised his voice just enough to break through her storm. "Karen, stop. You've been under review for months. We've received complaints about you, not just from residents, but from city officials. That hit hard. You've been using HOA resources without approval. We traced dozens of surveillance reports back to your personal system. You've crossed the line." For a moment, even Karen looked stunned. "You're lying," she whispered, but her voice cracked. "I was trying to keep the neighborhood clean, but Mr. Lanning didn't. Back down. You've misused your position. And the board voted last night to remove you. Officially, your privileges are revoked, effective immediately." He handed her an envelope and stepped back. The officer nodded slightly and said, "This would have gone a lot differently if you just talked to your neighbors." Karen stood frozen, folder trembling in her hand. Then, without a word, she dropped it. Papers scattered across the driveway, caught in the breeze. She turned and walked down the sidewalk, ignoring everyone. It was over, or so we thought. As folks gathered around, picking up the papers, one neighbor, Jeff, held up a page. "Guys, this isn't from our neighborhood," he said. "These are addresses from another HOA across town." That's when it clicked. Karen hadn't just been keeping tabs on you, she had been doing this to multiple neighborhoods. The rabbit hole went deeper than anyone guessed. We all stood there, realizing we'd just seen one chapter of a much stranger story in the days that followed. The neighborhood felt lighter. People who used to stay tucked behind their curtains now waved from their driveways. Kids rode bikes a little more freely. For the first time in months, it felt like we weren't all walking on eggshells. Karen's removal from the HOA wasn't just about one person losing power, was a reminder of what happens when control goes unchecked. The board launched an internal review, not just of Karen's actions, but of how the HOA operated. New rules were proposed to make sure no one person could ever weaponize the bylaws again. Transparency meetings were introduced, and residents actually showed up, eager to make sure the community stayed fair and balanced. As for the folder she dropped, most of it turned out to be junk, misleading photos, vague accusations, and complaints from a completely different neighborhood. Apparently, Karen had been volunteering her services to other HOAs without them even knowing. Mr. Lanning personally apologized to a few of us, including me. He admitted they should have acted sooner, but no one imagined how deep things had gone. The police never charged Corinne Shea, hadn't broken any criminal laws, but her influence was gone. Last we heard, she moved out quietly a few weeks later. Her house put up for sale without much notice. As for my pickup truck, it's still parked right where it belongs, in my own garage. And every time I pull into the driveway, I do it with a small grin. Knowing how a simple parking choice sparked a chain reaction that brought the neighborhood back together. If there's one thing I learned, it's that standing your ground, respectfully, but firmly matters. Especially when you're right. Because in the end, it wasn't about a truck. It was about people remembering that communities should be built on trust, not fear.